When Jesus told parables, he used farmers, vineyards, seeds, wages, debts, landowners, tenants. Most people read these as countryside illustrations. Jesus was rural. His audience was rural, so he reached for rural images. But the people in that crowd were not picturesque peasants in a pre-industrial idyll. They were living in a specific economic system, with specific pressures, specific fears, and specific grievances. And when Jesus mentioned a denarius, the daily wage of a laborer, every person in the crowd knew instantly what he was talking about. They knew it in their bodies. These parables were not about farming. They were about the economy that was crushing them. And Jesus was saying things about it that no one else dared to say out loud. First century Roman Palestine had a specific economic structure. It is worth understanding it precisely, because the parables only make full sense inside it. Rome owned the land, not in the sense that the government administered public land. Rome owned it. Local aristocratic families, many of them collaborators with the occupation, held large estates through patronage agreements with Roman authority. Most of the people in Jesus's audience were tenant farmers. They did not own the land they worked. They paid a portion of their harvest as rent, sometimes up to half. After paying their taxes to Rome on top of that, many were left with barely enough to survive until the next planting season. A denarius was 1 day's wage for a day laborer, not a comfortable wage, not a savings wage, a survival wage. 1 coin, 1 day, enough for food. Debt was structural. If a harvest failed, a drought, locusts, disease, the farmer borrowed. If he couldn't repay, he might lose his lease, his tools, eventually his family's freedom. Debt bondage was real and common. Into this world, to these people, with these pressures, Jesus began. The kingdom of heaven is like. Matthew 20, 1-16. A landowner goes to the marketplace at dawn and hires workers for 1 denarius, a full day's wage. Then he goes at 9 in the morning, at noon, at 3 in the afternoon, and again at 5, just 1 hour before sunset, and hires more workers each time. At the end of the day, he pays them all the same, 1 denarius. The early workers are furious. They worked 12 hours. The late workers worked 1 hour, same pay. And they are right. By every economic logic of their world and of ours, this is unjust. The landowner's response is striking. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? Notice, he does not argue that they were wrong about the facts. He paid everyone equally. He simply asserts his right to be generous. Then Jesus says, "So the last will be first and the first will be last." This is the reversal. In the economic system these workers lived in, early arrival, seniority, and accumulated hours were the only mechanisms for advancement. The parable strips those mechanisms away and replaces them with one thing: the owner's choice to be generous. The kingdom does not run on merit. It runs on grace. And grace, experienced from the outside, looks a lot like unfairness. Matthew 25, 14-30. A man going on a journey entrusts his wealth to 3 servants. 1 talent, 5 talents, 10 talents. A talent was roughly 20 years of a laborer's wages. These are not household sums. This is extraordinary wealth. 2 servants invest and double their master's money. The third buries his talent in the ground and returns it unchanged. The master's judgment of the third servant is harsh. The talent is taken and given to the one who has 10. But read carefully what the third servant says in verse 24. Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid and I hid your talent in the ground. This is not a theologically confused servant misunderstanding God's character. This is a rational description of how a first-century tenant farmer experienced an absentee landlord. Reaping where you didn't sow, that is exactly what Roman landlords did. They extracted wealth from land they didn't work, from people who did. The servant who hid the talent was not being lazy. He was being prudent by the rules of his economic world. Don't risk the master's capital. Return it intact. Stay out of trouble. Jesus does not vindicate this logic, but he makes the audience hear it clearly. Some scholars argue the harsh master in this parable is not an allegory for God at all, but a mirror. The servant who buried the talent did not misunderstand God. He had a theology. God is a reaper who takes what he didn't plant, a collector who extracts, and that theology produced paralysis. He hid the talent to protect himself from a God who, in his view, was fundamentally threatening. The parable doesn't correct the servant's theology directly. It shows the outcome of it. A God imagined as an extractive landlord will produce servants who hide, who do the minimum, who play defense, who return exactly what they were given and call it faithfulness. And the word from the master is hard. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, then you should have invested. If you believed I was that kind of master, the logic of your own theology demanded action, not burial. The parable is asking its audience, still living under actual extractive landlords, to decide which version of God they hold, the one who takes or the one who entrusts. Luke 15:11-32. The younger son asks for his inheritance early. In the first-century Middle East, this was not merely impolite. It was the equivalent of saying, I wish you were dead. An inheritance is paid at death. Asking for it while your father lives was a profound violation of honor. The father agrees. He divides his property. The son goes to a far country and wastes everything. Then a famine. He ends up feeding pigs. For a Jewish audience, there is no lower job. He is not just poor. He is ritually unclean, working for Gentiles, eating less than the animals. He rehearses a speech. I am no more worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. He's planning an economic transaction. He's going to negotiate his way back to a subsistence wage. But verse 20, the father sees him while he is still a long way off, and he runs. This is the moment first-century listeners would have gasped. A patriarch, a wealthy landowner with honor to protect, does not run. He walks. He receives honor. When he runs, he has to lift his robe, exposing his legs. This was considered shameful for a man of his standing. The father publicly humiliates himself to get to his son faster. There is no negotiated re-entry, no hired servant status, robe, ring, sandals, the fatted calf, a party. The elder son who stayed and worked refuses to come in. He lists his credentials, years of service, no violation of commands, not even a goat for a party. He sounds like the early workers in the vineyard. He has earned it. By every economic logic, he is right. The father goes out to him too, two exits from the house, two sons, both received without calculation. Jesus did not borrow agricultural language to make the kingdom easier to visualize. He walked into the economic world of his listeners, the denarius, the vineyard, the landlord, the debt, the hired servant, and told stories that made the kingdom visible inside that world. And in every story, the kingdom operates by a logic that breaks the economic rules. Not randomness, not unfairness for its own sake. A different accounting, where generosity is not rationed by merit, where the father runs, where the late worker gets the same day's wage, where what you've earned is not the point and what you've been given is. Which of these parables hits differently when you see the economic context? For a lot of people, it's the workers in the vineyard, because the anger of the early workers finally makes sense. Or the prodigal son, because the father running finally has its full weight. Drop the parable in the comments, just the name. And if this kind of contextual reading is something you want more of, there are more videos right here. We go deep, but not complicated.